Hey, hello BAT students. Um, let's talk about the TPR. So what I'm trying to do here is give you some guidance so that you will get the best possible technology profile report that you can. The first thing that we need to do is understand what the project is. Essentially, it should be a short overview of a conservation technology of your choice presented using some sort of web-based media. The important, or one of the important words here is that it's short. It's not expected to be an exhaustive document or an exhaustive presentation. Um, it is also, as we see it, a practice assignment to prepare you to create your EcoSpot later into the semester. And it is an assignment in which the amount of effort will be considered for your grade. That is essentially true to pretty much every assignment that you will be doing for your online courses. But here especially, I expect to see that you actually did more than the minimum in creating your TPR. What it is not is an exhaustive explanation of the technology and all of its applications. It's also not a summary including more than one technology. The idea is you pick one technology and then you go with it. You don't have to extend yourself towards more than one. And it's also not a perfect display of the use of that particular media that you picked. Um, we understand that for many of you, this is the first time that you are encountering uh, the media technology that you're using. And for that reason, we are not expecting perfection. Um, and also because, as I said, this is in preparation for the EcoSpot. Now, the first thing to know whenever you are creating any kind of content is to consider your audience. In this case, your audience is not me, it's not, as I said, your instructor, it is your peers in your class and the general public. Think about it this way. Your project should be something that you could share with someone outside of the class and that they would enjoy watching and that they would get informed by doing that. So try to think about the kind of project that if you were the one listening or looking at it, you would enjoy. And as a necessary part of that, you just try to make it entertaining and fun. Some things that you must consider when you're doing a project for a general audience, and I would say for anyone, just out of kindness to your audience, is to avoid having walls of text. If you're doing, any sort of format that resembles a presentation, the reason for that is no one really reads those. They're just boring, and then you can do way better using images and diagrams, or cutting up your text into smaller sections. The other thing that you don't want to do, especially if you are using an audio format, is to just read from a piece of paper in a monotone way. You want to make it sort of like a conversational style when you're doing this thing, so that you will keep the attention of whoever's listening. Now, as far as length, I've been getting a few questions from students saying, hey, how long does it have to be? And I'll tell you, there's no minimum length requirement. The main thing here is not how long it is, but that you include all the requirements that are listed for the assignment. If you're doing just a couple minutes, you're not going to be able to include all of those requirements. So it is important that you look at them, and as long as you have those requirements, then you're probably okay as far as length. There's also no official maximum length. However, I am recommending that you don't go over 10 minutes. And that is, again, out of consideration for your audience. You don't want to take too much of their time, and it might get boring if you go for over 10 minutes on your topic. So, of course, all of these mainly applies for formats that actually have a time limit. There's some media formats that don't, and in that case, I just suggest that try to make sure that the content that you're creating can be seen in 10 minutes. That it won't take more than that to go over what you produced. Now, going back to those requirements, you need to have a description of the technology. You need to have an example that shows how the technology is applied. You need to cover 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses at a minimum. And then you need to have citations for a minimum of 3 references. You can find these requirements in the to-do in which you selected your media, technology, and the topic for your TPR. Now, because those are the requirements, I think the easiest way to go about creating your project is to have that kind of progression in which you have like sections that cover each one of them. So you would start with the description of the technology, then move over to the example, then to the strengths and weaknesses, and then to the references. So for the description of the technology, you will essentially use simple language to explain how the technology works and what it does. We also ask you to provide an example of its general uses. Here, it's not the specific example that you will provide later. It's more just telling what the potential is. So you can say, this technology is used to track the movement of large animals, or this technology is used to know the location of fish in a lake, for example. You don't have to go into the specifics at first. Now, for visual media, which many of you are working with, it's a good idea to have a diagram to explain how things work. If there's no diagram or you can't find one online, there's always a possibility of just making one, using like shapes or even drawing one by hand and then scanning that. And this part about using a diagram is just a suggestion, but it certainly helps your audience understand what you're talking about when you have something like that. So just consider that. Moving on to the example that you're going to include in your TPR, this is a specific case of how the technology is used or could be used for conservation. My recommendation is to go and find a study that has been done using that technology. We require you to select an example that is relevant in your area or that might be of special interest to you or your master plan. You can also, if you have any personal experience with the technology, you may also include that there. You may also talk about your personal experience. Now, my suggestion to make this part easy is, and to make it easy to understand by your audience, is to present the example as a narrative, as a sort of story. So let me explain what I mean by that. You don't want to only say the technology has been used to detect the movement of fish in the Big Lake region. That doesn't tell me much. It doesn't tell me why we would want to know the movement of the fish, or why we care about the fish in that region, or what we learned from using the technology. Instead, it would be much better if you could say something like, fish in the Big Lakes are threatened by such and such issues, and then this group of scientists were wondering about their migration patterns. Then you go on to explain how the technology was used, and then going to saying, okay, they discovered that, whatever it is they discovered, and finally you give a short conclusion. You might notice that all these things that I'm mentioning are essentially what you would find in each of the sections of a scientific paper. And one way to make this easier for you, if you're using this kind of storytelling, is take an abstract, because it's going to have all the important information, and work from that to create sort of that short narrative. Then we move on to the strengths and weaknesses. This is pretty straightforward. You need to have a minimum of 2, but you can also include more if there are more. And of course, they have to be related to conservation, wildlife monitoring, or ecology. References. References are important in that a lot of people end up losing points because of the references. So take special care on having them as required. There is a requirement for 3 to 6 citations of primary peer-reviewed sources. By primary peer-reviewed sources, we mean articles from scientific or professional journals. There's other sources that you might include, but those do not count towards that minimum. So, for example, books or government reports or reports by NGOs are not peer-reviewed, so they do not count towards your minimum of 3. Other sources like websites are also not peer-reviewed, and maybe you should think twice about using sources like that, because anyone can put stuff online. But the important thing is that you use at least 3 peer-reviewed sources. Now, the style for references that we use for this class is APA. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to require everyone to use it. So if you want to use a different style for this project, that is okay. However, you have to be consistent. If you're using a different style, all of your references in this project have to be in that same style. I don't want to see that you have one reference in APA and another reference in MLA and another reference is in some different style. It has to look professional, and for that reason you have to be consistent within the project. For visual formats, you should include your list of references somewhere visible. That should be fairly easy. It might be a slide if you're doing something that resembles a presentation, or just put them somewhere if it's a different kind of format. Now, if you're doing something that is only audio, then you can't really do that. So what I'm asking you to do is to put the list of references in the post that you are including the link to your TPR, or that you are putting your TPR as an attachment. In that post, you put your list of references. And that's, again, only for those formats in which it's not possible to have them included in the TPR itself. Now, the other side of references is in-text citations. Those are important because they tell me, your references that you're including, what did you use them for? What information comes from each one of those references? So you need to have those. The important thing is to have the basic information for the sources of your project. So I am not requiring you to include it exactly as you would in text. Instead of that, you can modify it a little bit so that it, again, gives it a more fluid way of including that information, which is essentially the year and author for each one of the sources. So instead of saying Wansmat et al. 2013 described the structure, which sounds totally not like something you would use in normal conversation, you can say instead, in 2013, a group of scientists led by Theodore Wasman described the structure. Also, a note on in-text citations. You should have in-text citations, or at least that information, the author and year, included in the body of the TPR for each and every reference that you're including in your list of references at the end. So if you have a full reference for something, you also need to be mentioning that source somewhere in the body of your project. And with that, I want to say thank you for listening. Let's see. There we are. So thank you for listening. I hope that I helped you make things clearer for your TPR. If you still have questions, you can always email me. You can also post something to as a reply to any of my posts in the workshop. If you want to have a one-on-one real-time conversation using Skype or Google Hangouts, we also can do that. You just need to send me an email, or you can also sign up for my office hours. There's a link to sign up for my office hours in the Instructor's Corner. So I will be available and I can help you if you still have further questions, or if you're getting stuck with your TPR or you're frustrated because things are not working, we can figure something out.